Most people don't even realize that they are living someone else's life. Not because they gave up, and not because there is something wrong with them, but because at some point they simply stopped asking themselves what they truly want. They wake up in the morning, go where they're supposed to go, do what is expected of them, and from the outside everything looks fine. But inside, it's quiet, empty, as if something important was missed. 95% of people don't live in constant pain. They live in habit. In the habit of enduring, in the habit of postponing themselves for later, in the habit of calling someone else's life their own. And the most dangerous part is that this kind of life feels normal. It doesn't cause rebellion. It doesn't scream. It slowly becomes the background. And one day, you catch yourself thinking, why do I feel like I'm not living the life I'm supposed to live? This is not a crisis. It's not weakness. It's a moment of quiet awareness. A moment when you begin to understand that your life can be full of tasks, responsibilities, and plans, and still remain unlived. From early childhood, most of us are given a script. Not written on paper, but repeated so often that it becomes part of our thinking. Study well, choose a safe path. Don't take risks. Be realistic. Do what makes sense. Little by little, these voices replace our own, and we stop asking the most important question: what do I actually want? Instead, we begin to ask a different one. What is expected of me? This is how a life begins to form that looks correct on the outside, but feels chojoy on the inside. A life built from borrowed goals, borrowed definitions of success, and borrowed ideas of happiness. You follow the steps, you meet the requirements, you play your role well, yet something never fully clicks. Because the script you're living by was written by parents, teachers, society, fear, and tradition, but not by you. Over time, this script becomes invisible. It no longer feels imposed. It feels normal. You stop noticing that your choices are reactions, not decisions. That your direction was chosen for you long before you were aware enough to question it. And the longer you live inside someone else's expectations, the harder it becomes to remember that another life was ever possible. This is why so many people feel tired without knowing why, dissatisfied without being able to explain it, restless even when everything seems in place. They are not exhausted from effort. They are exhausted from living a life that does not belong to them. Living your own life means stepping beyond what is familiar. And for most people, that feels like danger. Not because they fear failure or mistakes, but because they fear other people's reactions. They are afraid of looking strange, afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of disappointing those whose approval has quietly become more important than their own inner voice. Society subtly teaches us that blending in is safe. Don't stand out. Don't go against the current. Don't ask unnecessary questions. And the stronger the need to be accepted, the easier it becomes to abandon yourself. This is how the fear of standing out turns into a comfortable cage, one you can live in for years while convincing yourself that this is the right way. Most people choose predictability over meaning, comfort over growth, approval over freedom. Not because they are weak, but because the fear of being themselves became stronger than the desire to discover who they could become. Over time, this fear becomes part of one's identity. It no longer feels like fear. It feels like common sense. People begin to defend the very limitations they once accepted out of fear of stepping outside the lines. And this is how life slowly shrinks to the boundaries that were chosen not by the heart but by fear. One of the most invisible traps in life is autopilot. It doesn't feel dangerous. It feels normal. The same mornings, the same routes, the same conversations, the same thoughts repeated day after day. Life begins to move forward without conscious choice. You do things not because you decided to, but because you did them yesterday. Decisions slowly turn into habits, and habits quietly turn into years. On autopilot, a person is busy but not present, active but not aware. Time passes, yet nothing truly changes. And because there is no immediate pain, there is no urgency to stop. 5 years go by, then 10. And one day, a question appears that has no easy answer. How did I end up here? Autopilot is dangerous not because it ruins life quickly, but because it wastes it silently. It convinces you that tomorrow will be different, while ensuring that today stays exactly the same. At some point in life, you knew what you wanted. You had dreams, impulses, curiosity, and a quiet excitement about who you could become. There was an inner voice that guided you, not loudly, but honestly. It didn't demand certainty. It only asked for attention. But every time you ignored it, chose what was safer, more acceptable, more reasonable, that voice became quieter. Not because it disappeared, but because it learned it was not being heard. Each compromise, each postponed dream, each moment of self-betrayal taught it to step back. Most people don't lose their inner voice in one dramatic moment. They lose it gradually, through repetition, through silence, through the habit of putting everyone else first. Until one day they say they don't know what they want, not realizing they once did. This is why so many people feel disconnected from themselves. They are not empty, they are unheard. And the longer the inner voice is ignored, the harder it becomes to recognize it when it finally tries to speak again. At some point, many people stop living and start convincing themselves that they are. This is where the substitution happens. Words begin to replace meaning, and survival is mistaken for life. Being busy is confused with moving forward. Stability is confused with fulfillment. Endurance is confused with strength. People tell themselves they just need to wait a little longer, that later, things will make sense, that first they must endure, adjust, sacrifice, and only then live. But later rarely arrives. It quietly turns into years, and years turn into a lifetime. What makes this substitution so powerful is that it sounds reasonable. It feels mature, responsible, safe. And that is why it goes unquestioned. A person can follow all the rules, do everything right, and still feel an unexplainable emptiness, because deep down, they know they have traded meaning for convenience. This is how a life can look successful on the outside and feel hollow on the inside. Not because something is missing, but because something essential was replaced. Most people live this way for one simple reason. Living your own life requires responsibility. And responsibility is uncomfortable. When you follow a familiar path, there is always something or someone else to blame. Circumstances, society, family, the system. But when you choose your own direction, there is no one else to hold accountable. Being one of the 95% means safety. It means belonging. It means never having to fully face yourself. And for many, that trade feels acceptable. Predictability feels better than uncertainty, even if it comes at the cost of meaning. Living consciously requires effort. It requires questioning what feels normal, challenging what feels familiar, and taking ownership of choices that might not be approved or understood. Most people are not unwilling to change. They are unwilling to be fully responsible for what change demands. This is why the majority stays where they are, not because they lack potential, but because stepping out of the crowd means standing alone with the consequences of your own choices. There is a moment that doesn't look dramatic from the outside. No collapse, no explosion, just a quiet shift inside. A subtle realization that something no longer fits. This is the silent turning point. Nothing needs to be destroyed. Nothing needs to be proven. The change begins with awareness, not action. With an honest question, is this truly mine? Not what works, not what is expected, but what feels aligned. This question doesn't demand immediate answers. It simply interrupts autopilot. It creates a pause. And in that pause, a different direction becomes possible. A quiet turning point doesn't change everything overnight, but it changes what you can no longer ignore. And once awareness appears, going back to unconscious living becomes impossible. The 5% are not braver, smarter, or more talented than everyone else. They don't possess secret knowledge or extraordinary confidence. What separates them is something far simpler and far more uncomfortable. They stopped living on autopilot. At some point, they began to question what felt normal. They paid attention to discomfort instead of silencing it. They chose awareness over convenience. While others avoided uncertainty, they leaned into it. They still experience fear, doubt, and resistance. The difference is that these feelings no longer make their decisions for them. They act consciously, even when it's uncomfortable, even when the outcome is unclear. The 5% don't have easier lives. They have honest ones. And that honesty is what gives their life direction instead of repetition.